Now I want to change the look of this game. At the moment, if I click on the game tab, you can see that it's actually quite bright. It looks really nice, but it's daytime, which is not really conducive to sort of a horror style game. So I want it to look like it's nighttime. So to do that, I'm going to manipulate a post-processing profile. Now, in the project window, assets, flooded grounds and scenes, we can see that we've already got a post-processing profile, and this determines the look of what you're seeing through the camera, so what you're seeing in the game tab. I'm not going to change this one. I'm going to keep the original the way it is. So you can either right click, choose create and post-processing profile to create a new one, or you can simply click on this one, edit and duplicate. Okay, shortcut is Ctrl+D. And we can create a copy. Now I'm just going to rename this one. So right click on it and choose rename, and I'll call it Horror Night, and I'm just going to call it PP for post-processing. There we go. Okay, now I need to find the FPS camera. So in the search, I'm just going to type FPS, and it's the controller. Okay, and once I've got that clicked, I can just delete that and it takes me straight to it. So I'm going to click on the camera, and we can see that the post-processing behavior script has this profile attached to it. So what we're going to do, take our new profile, click and drag and place it into that slot. So now we should be able to see this update in real time. Let me just drag this over so that I can see a little bit more of the inspector window. Click once on this one, Horror Night, and let's go through these elements. So we do want fog, and in fact we can just leave it the way it is. That's perfectly fine. Now I am going to enable anti-aliasing. Okay, what this does is just soften out these edges. Alright, they may have looked a little bit too jagged for my liking. However, the way that anti-aliasing works is that it actually renders it out at twice the size, or in some cases actually 4 times the size, and then shrinks it down to its resolution, which softens these edges. So if it's running at HD 1920 by 1080, which is 2K, it'll actually render it out at 4K and then shrink it down. Okay, and obviously if it's 8 times, then it's running at 8K. 4 times rather, it's running at 8K, you know, so just be aware that it is going to eat up a lot of your system resources. So if your game is running really slowly, probably uncheck anti-aliasing. Should work fine on my system. Okay, so ambient occlusion. So let's make some changes to this one. So I want the intensity to be roughly about 1.4. Now ambient occlusion just basically gives you these darker shadows around the edges of objects. So where one part of an object is overlaying another part, you should see some naturalistic shadows appearing. Okay, the radius I'm going to leave at 0.3, and the sample count I'll just leave that at lowest. That's perfectly fine. This should be okay. So I've slightly increased the intensity. Experiment with that and see what you get. I think if you increase it too much, it actually looks a little odd. Don't want this one, screen space reflection. Depth of field is very processor intensive, and I don't need it in this game. Motion blur obviously just recreates the motion blur that you see, but once again it does eat up a lot of system resources. Eye adaptation actually makes your screen a lot darker, and I am going to include this bloom. Okay, so bloom will cause any highlights to really start to glow, and you will see it a lot in commercial games. It looks really nice, particularly in nighttime games. So I'm just going to click bloom to switch this on. Its intensity, and you can just click and drag to increase or decrease intensity. I'm going to set its intensity to about 1.4. Okay, the threshold gamma is basically going to control how localized that glow is. So is it really diffuse and all over, or is it very, very specific to the highlights? Okay, so as you drag this up, it would get really diffuse. Sorry, as you drag it down, it gets very, very diffuse, and as you drag it up, it gets very, very specific. Okay, so it does look quite nice when you start to really come down. And you can even animate this as a sort of almost like a dreamlike fade out as well, which is quite nice. So threshold, I'm actually going for 0.7. Okay, so you can start to see that little bit of a glow effect in that tree there, which is quite nice. Soft knee, I'm going to change this to 0.8, in fact 0.9. Okay, and the radius overall that is affecting it, I'm going to change this to about 5.6. Okay, so now you can start to see that glow coming out there. This really does make it look a little bit more commercial. And anti-flicker, I'm going to click this just to ensure that there's no flickering of this bloom, which can happen, particularly if you get a really bright, intense highlight. Sometimes it can actually flicker when you're moving your camera. This ensures that that doesn't happen. Not doing anything with the dirt. Okay, now the color grading element is what is going to basically control the look of this this post-processing. I recommend that you use Filmic. It actually gives it a really nice look, but you have 3 to choose from, either non-Filmic or neutral. Filmic is the one that I almost always go with. Post exposure is how bright your image is going to be. So if I were to increase this, obviously it gets very bright. Now as I come down below 1, notice that it gets darker, and as I get into the minus numbers, obviously practically nighttime. Alright, so this is how you control the overall lightness of your scene, and I'm just going for -1. So now it's more of a kind of a nighttime scene. The temperature, I'm going to change this one to about -52, so it starts to take on that blue nighttime feeling. Okay, it's quite nice. Don't worry about this sky, we're gonna change that soon. It's a little too bright at the moment. The tint, so you can change the overall feel of this. I'm actually going to increase this a little bit to around 6.2. Okay, so it's starting to look like a sort of a midnight moon sort of look. Saturation, I'm actually going to increase this slightly. Hue shift I'm going to leave as it is. So the saturation, I'm just going to increase this. Or actually no, I'm going to decrease this actually to about 0.4. Okay, I don't want it to be overly saturated. 0.45. Okay, and the contrast, I'm actually going to come up to around 1.4. Okay, 1.424. So now it really does look like a sort of a nighttime scene. Let's just click on this and enable nighttime scene. So now you can start to see that it's starting to look more effective. Okay. Under the channel mixer, you can actually change either red, green, or blue channels independently. Okay, and I'm actually going to do that, I think. So, actually, I'm quite happy, I think, with this. I was going to change the red, green, and blue values, but actually, I don't want to mess with this now. I think that looks quite nice. Okay, you can manually change the curves if you want, but I think we've got a look that looks quite nice. If you wanted to use your own lookup table, you can do. I'm not going to bother at this moment in time. Chromatic aberration will give, it will actually divide the red, green, and blue channels, and it looks like something out of, you know, like the old 3D movies from the 1950s. Probably stay away from that one. Grain. So at the moment, I'm actually quite happy with the amount of grain. As you can see, it's very, very subtle. Let me try just increasing it slightly to about maybe 0.304. Well, maybe too much. 0.26. Okay, yeah, that's quite nice. All right, so we've got some grain, but it's not too harsh. Okay, and the vignette basically just gives this outer, very, very subtle, darker outline to the image, and you can control how close that comes in to the center of the screen. Okay, dithering, I'm not going to use that. All right, so that's the nighttime look that I was going for in the game. And if you want to try this out, if you want to play it now and see what it looks like, feel free to do so.